afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Lynn Gillam. I'm from the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health, and it's my pleasure to chair this session. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional custodians of the land that we're gathered on here today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to this session, Country, Place and Wellbeing. In this session, we're going to be considering ideas about the social and built environment and the way that that might promote or diminish identity, sense of self, values, and other things that matter to us in various ways. The University and the City of Melbourne both display remarkable cultural diversity within their communities, but what does the environment around us say about that cultural diversity? What makes diverse populations feel valued and welcomed? How do we express our values through our environment? We're joined by three speakers this afternoon. I'll introduce the first speaker to you now. We've had a change of order from the program, so our first speaker is Professor Marcia Langton. Marcia is the Foundation Chair of Australian Indigenous Studies at the University of Melbourne. Marcia originally trained as an anthropologist at ANU and as a human geographer at Macquarie University. She's worked extensively in Aboriginal studies in the Northern Territory and Cape York, contributing especially to land and native title claims. Marcia is a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences of Australia and a member of the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. And for 5 years, she was the chair of the Cape York Institute for Policy and Leadership. So would you join me now in welcoming Professor Marcia Langton?
Thanks, Lynn. I acknowledge the traditional owners, the Kulin people and the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Thank you so much, Fiona, for inviting me to your wonderful Festival of Ideas. The built environment is a term that captures the physicality of Western ideas of dwelling, but has a very weak link to the less permanent ways of inhabiting space and shelter of non-Western cultures. Let me tell you a story. I was conducting research at a remote community in 1995 with a colleague. We were commissioned to study housing needs in a particular community and respond to the need for serviced land for additional housing. We conducted a household survey of about 70 houses with more than 1,000 residents. Much of our time for conducting this research was curtailed by sorcery events. Over several nights, groups of intoxicated young men, recently inducted into sorcery during their ceremonial duties, had cursed the shop, a house and a truck during our visit. After each of these sorcery events, the buildings were closed, the truck was parked, and no one could enter or use them. The inconvenience to everyone, including the residents of the house, who immediately vacated the premises, those who needed to buy food from the store, and the persons who normally drove the truck, was extreme, and daily life was disrupted for more than a week. On each occasion, the most senior sorcerer was summoned from another community and flown in at considerable cost by charter. He carried out ceremonies to remove the curses and thereby allow the residents to move back in to the house and to shop at the store and to use the truck. One house, however, he found had been so cursed that no one could remove it, and the house was never again allowed to be used. In a community where the overcrowding was extreme, the loss of this house and the periodic prohibition on residing in cursed houses placed a heavy burden on families. This experience forced me to ask a question. Is there a necessary connection between Aboriginal culture and good health? I had found that many people with a genuine desire for the preservation of Aboriginal culture, whether Indigenous or non-Indigenous, assumed that the enjoyment of Aboriginal culture had a positive impact on health or led to better health. The forced evacuation of houses had such a detrimental impact on families, mostly extended families with many small children, had impressed on me that the reverse is quite often the case. That is, that aspects of Aboriginal culture are detrimental to good health. Much has been said about the need to incorporate Aboriginal cultural values into housing design, health service delivery models, and many other aspects of the larger reform agenda aimed at closing the gap. In truth, some of this well-intentioned advocacy is misinformed about Aboriginal culture. In my opinion, one of the reasons for the popularity of fundamentalist Christianity and the prayer meeting mode of practicing this style of Christian faith lies in the frustration of so many Aboriginal people, especially women, with the practice of sorcery and the resulting riotous impact on their family life. Many Aboriginal families want a way of life where they might retreat from the constant demands of the Aboriginal cultural life. Consultations about whether they want Aboriginal cultural values incorporated into housing design or health service delivery are so often carried out in a superficial way or based on superficial ideas about Aboriginal culture and rarely lead to an accurate portrayal of what the locals might want in relation to the place of traditional cultural values in a modern context. Too fearful or even ashamed to speak about the impact of sorcery, Aboriginal people who might be consulted do not raise it, and it has rarely appeared in official reports as a factor in the relationship between Aboriginal culture and service delivery. I should add that it arises also in relation to hospitalisation, because hospitals is where so many people die. And it is why the euthanisation project in the Northern Territory about a decade ago failed. It was extremely unpopular, even with the Aboriginal sorcerers. There are many other features of Aboriginal culture that are similarly invisible. In any case, a standard house with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen and a living room and perhaps a veranda is not amenable to the very large extended families that are typical of Aboriginal communities. Nor is it possible to rearrange this basic set of needs to accommodate imagined cultural values when the practical needs are so urgent. And also the costs are prohibitive. The outstanding anthropologist and architect who has grappled with such issues intelligently, Dr. Paul Memmott, provides ample evidence in his marvellous book, Gunya, Gundi and Worley, The Aboriginal Architecture of Australia, as to the difficulties inherent in matching cultural values to dwelling and the complexity of such an endeavour. While turning on its head the belief that Indigenous people were devoid of houses or towns when Europeans first reached Australian shores, he details diverse topics in Indigenous architecture and settlement, including a continental overview of architectural forms, materials, construction techniques, 3 regional overviews of shelters and houses, traditional camps, domiciliary behaviour, town camps or fringe camps that emerged after colonisation, how architects have and could apply traditional cultural ideas in design, and the symbols and meanings of shelters and houses. My proposition in full is country is an Aboriginal English term that encompasses a range of meanings understood by Aboriginal people who have been acculturated in an Aboriginal group with customary land ownership traditions. It is important that there is better access by knowledgeable Aboriginal people to effective means of communication of the relevance of Aboriginal culture to the issues of wellbeing. There may be strong or weak relevance depending on the issue. In matters of Aboriginal dwelling, of inhabiting a place and shelter, cultural values are applied across vast landscapes as well as intimate spaces at the same time. There is too much to know to venture into this difficult field without expertise. This is why only practitioners of Aboriginal culture should be involved in making determinations about these issues. Unless you have been evicted from your house by sorcerers, you could hardly know about the complications of Aboriginal culture and the demands of modernity. This is why I believe that my proposition is important in our endeavours to close the gap. We should not make easy assumptions. We should not assume that there is some positive, causative connection between a cultural value and well-being. Evidence is required for such propositions. As usual, good intentions can be dangerous. As to how such communication might take place, I should say that most of the people that I know in Arnhem Land, for instance, use mobile phones. They're on Facebook. And I have had fun developing an imaginary Aboriginal Home Beautiful project in which the kinds of questions that people ask me, such as my friend from Elcho Island who wanted to know, how do you get one of those wonderful barbecue areas in your backyard, and where do you buy the wooden salt shakers? I promptly took him to Bunnings. So that Aboriginal people are able to work on their homes and make additions and changes to their homes themselves in a way that empowers them to create ideas and implement them at home to make their lives better. And I think that, very simple idea could be supported by Bunnings, by Mitre 10, by magazines, and enable Aboriginal people to consider their home environments, which are, standard Besser block 3-bedroom homes with nothing much in the way of Aboriginal cultural values attached to them, but I might also add they have nothing much in the way of white Australian cultural values attached to them either. So such blank spaces could be Aboriginalised, and I think that it's entirely possible that Aboriginal people be empowered to do so themselves in a very simple way. So part of my idea is that Aboriginal people send into a website their Instagram snaps from their mobile phone of the things they like and the things they don't like about the housing in their communities, and design additions and changes to homes that they do like. So I've explained this idea to people. Of course, most people think I'm nuts, but then they know nothing about Aboriginal culture, do they? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. As you know, there'll be time for your comments and questions once all three speakers have spoken. Our second speaker is Mr. Con Karapanayotidis. Con is the CEO and founder of the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. Con, according to his bio, though you can't tell, of course, is proudly Greek, and grew up in a small country town in Victoria where his personal experiences inspired him with a passion for human rights. And he went on to become a lawyer, social worker and teacher. His work as the CEO has been recognised with being a finalist in the Australian of the Year for Victoria in 2007. He was voted one of Australia's 20 unsung heroes as part of the launch in 2008 of the new Portrait Gallery in Canberra. And he was voted one of Melbourne's 100 most influential people in the Age Melbourne magazine recently. In 2010, Con was awarded a Churchill Fellowship and in 2011 an Order of Australia Medal. So would you join with me in welcoming Con?
I'm going to walk around. I'd like to start by paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri people, and to elders, both past and present of the Kulin Nation. So we're talking about social and built design, communities, and how they impact on identity, belonging, inclusion. So let's imagine we start with this as our experience of the social and the built. Everywhere you move in your community, you're not safe. Those people that you think are there to protect you, from your police to your government to your military, are the ones that persecute you. Those small comforts of something like a cigarette is used to torture you. The bed that you find peace and sanctuary in is what they tie you down to while they rape you. The hospital that's meant to be a place of healing is probably a torture chamber. The police, your protectors, the people that are sitting there actually persecuting you. Everywhere you look, the idea of trust, of safety, of security in that social and built environment is gone, is lost. Tyranny, dictatorship, oppression has stripped you of that. You anchor yourself as much as you can in family, community, and work, and yet none of those things can give you the social and economic and political capital to protect you from persecution. You flee your country seeking an environment that is one where you are free from torture and free from the possibility of death. You find that the only way you can flee safely in your region is on a leaky boat, because all other pathways to actually be part of this country in a global economy with borderless borders for multinationals is by getting on a leaky boat that is likely to take your life. You arrive in this nation and your first experience of Australia is a detention centre. And in that centre, you will slowly diminish and perish and disintegrate. In that centre, you will learn the first experience of a social and built environment that you will have in your welcome to Australia is a place that is there for the purpose of destroying you. In the 12 years that I've been working with people seeking asylum, what is very evident and clear to me is that the architecture we have built is one with a specific purpose of torturing people. The architecture we have built is one for the specific purpose of socially excluding people. The architecture of the built environment is one of slowly destroying people. Successive governments, if we can extinguish hope, if we can extinguish identity, if we can strip refugees from any semblance of their humanity and of their dignity, we have succeeded in winning an election. When you look at the social environment, and I work with thousands of refugees over the last 12 years, and when I think about there are close to 20,000 across this country that are forbidden from working, the most fundamental tenet of an inclusive society. Through work, we all get identity. Through work, we get economic capital that allows us to participate. But we have, from a Labor to a Liberal, a policy for the specific purpose of excluding refugees from the economy. Because when they're excluded from the economy, we can hate them. We can demonise them. We can resent them. We can sit there and go, look at those lazy people who do not want to contribute to this country. Forget the fact that we are a country built by Aboriginal people and boat people. Forget that that's our history, that we are the most successful example of multiculturalism anywhere in the world. But the narrative is one around these people are a threat. These people are a danger. These people are somehow jeopardizing our way of life. And so as to protect that, we're going to create a social and built environment that breaches every law, that breaches all the fundamentals of a moral compass, that breaches every essence of human decency, and we're going to exclude refugees. When I work with a community that is forbidden from working, when I work with a community that is forbidden from family reunification, at the heart of all cultural identity is family. Family passes rituals and stories and identity and values and a sense of belonging to community. We are sitting there and in successive generations stripping away from refugees their right to families. We are taking it from them. The boat that sank on the weekend with 32 children who drowned. Government knew the boat was sinking and let it drown. One was a man where his pregnant wife and 8 children drowned in that sea. In recent boat sinkings, one before that, where 13 bodies were found, our government actually left them to rot in the water. The idea being we are sending a message of this is what awaits you. If you arrive here now to this country, we're not even going to put you in one of those torture cells of a detention centre. I remember in my early years walking through the Curtin Detention Centre, I saw this cage and a man standing in there. And I asked them, what is the purpose of this cage? And they go, the purpose of this cage is for when people misbehave, they are put there. They are put there like a fucking animal. They are put there so we can look at them and we can say, you are less than zero. And as the men that I work with come out of years of detention centres, they say, in this country, what I know from this country is that I am less than zero. From nothing to zero is where I go on any given day. And now Tony Abbott beats his chest, a man of Catholic faith, and sits there and says, as a man of faith, I'm going to strip families from the chance of ever being with one another again. I'm going to assure that the fundamental things that you need for successful settlement and social inclusion, I'm not going to ever let them have it. I'm going to force women and children onto boats so they can drown at sea. I'm going to take away their right to appeal. I'm about to cut our refugee intake program by 31%. Or so that I can send a clear message, of you do not belong. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from an environment that is built, driven by fear and intolerance and racism? At the heart of it, we need to stop and go, how do we work with refugee communities to reclaim community, rebuild it, reclaim self, and reclaim opportunity? In rebuilding community, it's really simple. Like what I do at my work every day, it is providing a place of welcome. It is providing a place that diffuses all power structures. It's providing a place from the colours on the wall to the smile they get at the door where they are told they are welcome. That there are Australians that actually give a shit about what is happening to refugees, and there is a place where they are safe and there is a place that embraces them. We need to rebuild self, and that is remembering that refugees, people seeking asylum, are not asylum seekers. They are human beings with ambitions, with dreams, with family, with culture and community. They don't need to be rescued. They are resilient. They are survivors. And our challenge is how do we work together with them to allow them to reclaim that power, to allow them to reclaim that self. And that's where rebuilding opportunity comes into it. What if we saw refugees as an entrepreneurial opportunity? What if we sat there and said, these are the most resilient, resourceful people on earth, and they are willing to do anything to actually contribute and make this country even greater? What if we had a time of an ageing population with massive skill shortages, we sat there and said, here are people that can resuscitate our manufacturing industries, our regional and rural communities. Here are people that if we could see the potential in them, they could be such an extraordinary asset in enriching our community. And we need them. And that's the big challenge about how do we build a model that allows people to heal from the torture and persecution that they have fled? How do we build a model that includes people? And at the heart of that is the right to work, participate, be included, have your family. And then how do we rebuild opportunity? And that's about unlocking the potential of refugees by giving them the chance to fulfill their dreams. As I always say, just because someone is poor does not mean their dreams are not big. And the people that I work with have the most extraordinary dreams and the most extraordinary ideas, and all they need is a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Con. Could I welcome and introduce now our third speaker, Associate Professor Paparangi Reid. Paparangi is the Deputy Dean Maori in the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences at the University of Auckland. Paparangi is a leading Maori health researcher, and she was named Public Health Champion in 2007 by the Public Health Association of New Zealand for her work. Her research interests include, in particular, analysing disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous citizens as a means of monitoring government commitment to Indigenous rights. So could you join with me in welcoming Paparangi Reid?
As last night, I want to acknowledge my pleasure in receiving this invitation to speak at this festival and on this beautiful land, and I acknowledge the guardianship of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I want to propose that we consider place as a central part of our identity. Here's my place, a little village at the end of a dusty road, a long dusty road, but one village where my father instilled in me that it was our home and our place. At the end of this road, there's a stream, which hopefully, there you can see it. And that's where my grandmother's grandfather lived. And from that place where I took this photo, you can hear the roar of the winds coming off what we call Te Moana or Raukawa. Some people call it the Tasman Sea. But there was a latecomer that got that name. And you can hear the roar of the ocean, and you can smell the sea spray and feel it on your face, and you can taste it on a good day. But most of all, you can taste the mussel beds that are there on the reef. And my memory is rekindled by the taste of mussels from that reef and the sweet yet slightly metallic taste of them. And so many times my father made them into curried mussels in a Dutch oven on the beach side, and I can smell the smoke from the fire. So belonging to that space is not just a name, it's visceral, it's multi-sensory, embedded into memories and voices, and I can hear my late father's voice talking about the place. I can hear my aunties and uncles, my cousins and elders. Don't they look nice? I have failed to instill this visceral sense of belonging into my kids. They've identified with their father's place more strongly because it's further up the coast, it's prettier, the road is tar-sealed, the surf is better, there's easy access to coffee and fish and chips, and there's pippies, not mussels. So they comment on place in buildings in Ahipara, which is their place, and they comment on the ugly ones that stand out compared to the ones that nestle into the environment. They engage with projects to clean up rubbish, to stop river pollution, to promote this local sewage scheme, to plant native trees and shrubs, and prevent deforestation of the growing sand dunes. That they engage with te taiao, the environment. In Māori, a pepeha is a saying we use to introduce ourselves. And when we say our pepeha, we name our mountain, we name our river, we name our ocean as part of our identity. But it can be formulaic. And I think it's a real challenge today to instill in ourselves and our children to make it visceral. In our language, the possessive pronouns are at two levels. There's the are category and the or category. Or things are superior relative to oneself, like parents and elders. Are things are, I suppose you could call them inferior, like children. Environment and things of the natural world are of the or category. So in my way of knowing, I can't own the natural environment, it owns me. We believe in our Indigenous worldview that the planet Earth is our mother and the sky, Papa Tūnuku, and the sky is our father, Ranginui, the sky, the solar system and the universe. So we're connected, and this connection is of consequence. It demands respect and mutual benefit. The word for Indigenous for us is tangata whenua, and it means people of the land, not people on the land, or people digging into the land, or people destroying the land. And there's an urgent need for this Indigenous worldview to be adopted by all people. Not that they try and be Indigenous, but that we deeply associate place and identity with our natural environment. We locate ourselves as an intimate part of the world and the environment. And to do this, we have to teach, not only by words, but by example, our children to hear, feel, taste, smell, and know their place in such a way that they will be less likely to see land as a mine, a mountain as something to walk all over, leave oxygen tanks on and conquer, a river as a sewer. They'll be less likely to see the seabed as a foundation for a drilling platform, and less likely to see the air as an exhaust vent. We need to engage children. Oh, I've given up on adults, sorry. On every opportunity about the fundamental need to engage with life, from gardening through to the built environment. I expect that next time, international visitors like myself will be Skyped in so that we don't burn too many air miles. So my proposition is that we build on identity in place, we instill it in our children, and we allow them to critique the built environment through this way of knowing the natural environment. And from that, we will live side by side in our environment as people of the land, not just on the land. Thank you. I have trouble with time, and so I used a pecha kucha, and it got away on me a bit last night, but I've had a bit more success with a bit of management today. So.
Thank you, speakers. What will happen now is I believe the lectern will magically disappear. The three speakers will magically appear up on stage here, and then we'll have ample time for your questions and comments. I'll just stand back. Can I remind you that if you prefer technology to the human voice, you can participate by Twitter, and Thomas down the front here will be passing on your pithy remarks, your challenges, your questions, and I can pass them on to our speakers. Can I also remind you to have a look for the Bunjil's Nest project, which you may have seen on your way in, but certainly on your way out, if you haven't noticed it, pop in there, have a look, and consider participating in that project. We all done? Marcy's too close to the edge. She's going to join us in the middle. Alrighty, now let's get started, shall we? I'm very happy to make up a question or two if you need me to, but I reckon you don't need me to, do you? Would anyone like to start? Comment, question, challenge over here. Thank you.
Hi, question to Marcia. I was a little surprised at the end there. I enjoyed your talk, by the way. But at the end there, you referred to the houses as a bit of a blank slate, and the impression I got at the end there in summary was that it just had to be filled with a particular cultural affect, in this case the Aboriginal one. Given that there's so much goes into, in architectural magazines, this discussion of how space is structured and what layout that the rooms have and the like, it just seems so incredibly imbued culturally already that it's not a blank slate at all. I was just surprised that you represented it as such.
Marcia, houses are blank slates.
I didn't mean that they should be filled up with stuff. And they are, in fact, pretty blank. I mean, you know, usually they're Besser block houses on a concrete block. They don't even have a veranda. You know, in Aboriginal communities, the housing program just means that, you know, these boxes are inserted into the landscape on a grid, and that's what people get. Okay, so there are no architects. These things are put up by project developers who are commissioned to do it under a contract, usually to government, sometimes to a public-private partnership with an Aboriginal community. And, you know, they're literally 3 bedrooms, a living room, a wet area, and a kitchen. And they come not even with, you know, basic hardware like towel railings and so on. And because there is such overcrowding in Aboriginal homes in many communities, especially in remote Australia. The houses can't accommodate the number of people who feel that it's theirs under an extended family arrangement. And so people actually build outside the house. So they put up bough sheds, they cook outside, and so, the Aboriginal family will extend beyond the walls outwards. So I don't mean that the houses should be filled up, but, life could be so much more pleasant for those people who have to cook outside or even sleep outside if they were enabled to work on the house in such a way that, they could extend it or build pavilions or shelters beyond the walls of the house, or even change some features inside the house because of various kinds of kinship taboos. It's all too difficult to explain in 10 minutes. I've mentioned one very interesting publication that you might want to have a look at, so I wasn't being flippant. And I'm perfectly well aware that, a house, has an historical origin back in Europe, but houses have historical origins here. And I was just recently down in Western Victoria and visited the ancient village of the Gunditjmara. And I stood in the middle of this circle of stones, which is more than a circle actually, but it's just one of quite a large village that ran along a volcanic sinkhole. So it is actually a kind of spiral with one rock wall going out like that. So it's kind of a windbreak, and it provides more an extension to the house. And windbreaks are very popular throughout Aboriginal Australia. So, there's a lot to know about the Aboriginal world, is my point. And because there's such diversity, I think it's entirely possible to empower local Aboriginal people to think about their houses and to do things to them that they think will make it better. Because that's what, other Australians do.
Thanks, Marcia. Paparangi, you were nodding. Do you want to add something?
No, I agree. No, I think it was a perfect answer.
No more to be said on that one then. Thank you. Would anyone like to take that up or raise a new topic? We've got one here. Just hang on for the microphone. It's approaching at great speed.
Hi. During our recent election campaign, I checked the main party's policies on asylum seeker intake and the existing economic migrant programs, and the last figures that I saw were around 190,000 are permitted to come into Australia under the economic migrant program, as I call it, and 20 to 30 or 15, depending on which party you looked at, for asylum seekers. And it seemed to me that it should be the other way around, if anything, given the tremendous motivation that people fleeing persecution have to build a new life. And we know about that in Australia. It's part of our 20th century history. And I would tie that in also with Kevin McLeod's programs on housing cooperative schemes. Some of you will have seen the programs where disadvantaged, poor people were given the skills to build their own houses and customise them to their own taste. And I can see that tying in with the Indigenous community too, giving them some extra skills that are marketable and giving them the opportunity to tailor their own houses and more in tune with their own tastes and their values and their culture and their own personal culture, because that will obviously differ throughout the Indigenous community.
Thank you for those comments. I'm wondering if any of our panel members would like to comment on something there.
I would just briefly say, from a housing point of view, the biggest challenge for people seeking asylum is 1 out of 3 of the people we work with live on no income. So when you're excluded from the economy and have no income, well, how do you engage in that space? For the rest who come out of detention after they've paid rent, they're forbidden from working for the next 5 years, and so they live on about $3 a day. That's to feed your family, turn on the lights, travel, that's everything. So for the people we work with, beyond living in shitty and dangerous housing, they're living in housing that's empty. So bare housing. I was talking to a family the other week who's living in a house where they can't even afford to turn the electricity on. And they've got 2 little kids. So the idea of home, already lost, and the grief of lost home, and then their first experience of a home after they get out of a prison is a home that is bare, and is a home where there is no comfort, and all they're reminded of is how they're not welcomed and wanted in this country. And they look to their children ashamed and guilty because they can't provide for them, even though they're desperate to.
The whole point of my sort of scheme was that these people would be given support when they came.
So is that a possibility, Con? Housing cooperatives, even for people who aren't allowed to work?
If you're not allowed to, yeah.
You have to change everything.
If you're allowed to work, anything's possible. And, you know, like my parents came here, my father's education stopped at the age of 9, you know, because he was too poor, his family. Given opportunity, that's what we used to give people in this country. Given opportunity, people are extraordinarily resilient. People are capable of anything.
All righty, thank you. Now where are we going? Up here? Yep.
I lived on a community for 6 years, and an Aboriginal community called Balgo, and I have seen the most inventive people, tenacious and determined to create things out of nothing. I have seen government continually come and ask community what they want, and unfortunately those monies dissipated, and to not actually deliver those services promised to the community. And even seen an architect who'd come in and worked with the community and asked them what they wanted, and seen and had her ring at a later date telling us that she was really sorry, but all her designs that the community wanted had been culled because of funding. Marcia, I think your ideas are brilliant, and giving the opportunity for Indigenous people to have their voice now and in the future is the only way forward.
Marcia, would you like to comment?
No, that's
Just
right.
nod.
I agree.
Can I ask you, audience, is the idea clear? We actually know the right answer already. The right answer is give people an opportunity to work out for themselves what they want and allow them to do it, and provide them with at least some minimal resources. Is that the answer?
Well,
Marcia? Yeah.
Well, look, on the Festival of Ideas Twitter stream, it's been said that, it's been stated in 140 characters that what I just said, that Aboriginal people should be allowed to build their own houses. It's not what I said, is it? What I actually said was that given a 3-bedroom box-style house, what can Aboriginal people do with it to make it a place where they'll have a pleasant life and, hopefully be healthy? Towel rails, for instance, would help. Where are people going to buy towel rails in an Aboriginal community? Where are they going to buy a place to hang clothes or hang up a tea towel? You know what I'm talking about if you've been to Balgo Hills. There are no such things in an Aboriginal home, and they cannot be purchased anywhere. But would Aboriginal people like to have them? Yes, they would. Yes, they would like to have a place to hang a towel and their clothes. The Twitter kids are saying that I'm saying, let's go back to Aboriginal culture and let Aboriginal people build their houses. No, I'm saying, let them have the Home Beautiful exercise. Let them expand and make changes to these houses, because even if they use their own money, they'd end up building a house like that because of the prohibitive costs of building houses in remote Australia. That's what they would do anyway, because you have to service land, you have to put in plumbing, electricity, and the money that's left over, the cost of transport, the cost of labour, you end up with a 3-bedroom box. Just let people rent it, amend it, change it, add things to it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying let's go back to, collecting stones and building a house. I'm not saying that at all. Hello, can you hear me, Twitter kids? And it's just, if people just had a screwdriver, right? An electric screwdriver. How many people in the room have got an electric screwdriver?
I'm frightened of them.
See, a third of the people in the audience has one. We all, you know, it's just an essential part of your toolbox, isn't it? Just to fix things up around the house. I am just talking about a program like that, but bureaucrats don't function that way. This has to be a community-run project. That's what I'm saying.
So, if we know the answer, and Marcia has stated it in really simple terms, doesn't seem like a complicated answer, maybe there's another question we need to ask about why it isn't happening. And, just while you've got your thinking caps on, we've been talking so far about, I guess, the personal built environment, people's homes. I wonder if there are people in the audience thinking about the public built environment, like this building, for example. So can I just encourage you to think about that? There was some hands up, there's one there, and then one over here.
I'm just interested in understanding each of you talk about how your different cultural people are struggling, and I wonder if the question you're looking for is how, as a community and an individual in a community, can assist in opening a door. So when you talk about a built structure, you're actually talking about a built society. And so my question is to the panel, can you see a very simple action that as a community sitting here, we can open a door to a person, you know, because it's all, you know, we talk so broadly about problems rather than individuals. And Paparangi, I just loved the personal story that you gave, that I wonder, you know, how people can reflect on that in a personal way to have an
Paparangi,
action.
could we go to you? How can we open a door in a simple way to another person?
Well, I think we've talked about three different elements of the same thing. I believe that the Indigenous worldview that ingrains place and identity is an important first step. Con says there are people excluded from that very basic human right that I want everyone to have, the Indigenous right, that everyone should have, so that we get a safer environment, and that will translate into a built environment. So there's some people who are excluded from that. So cons, I'm saying vote for cons. I would vote for cons proposition. But then Marcia raises another point, that even though some people might have the Indigenous connection, they're frustrated by the way in which they're allowed to engage with the built environment. So it's quite an interesting mixture of different breaches of rights that we've talked about in our different talks.
So, Paparangi, maybe some response to that is a structural response or a government level response, but what about you and me? Is there anything we can do? Say? Object
Well,
to?
we have to engage with all three propositions. So actually you should vote for all three propositions. So get busy. Because we actually have to engage with our children and with another generation to think differently about the world. We have to engage with people whose rights are being breached, and we have to engage with Indigenous rights.
So maybe one of the things we can do when we go home today is talk to someone else about those ideas? Maybe our children? If we can get the plugs out of their ears.
Yeah, but, even though I said children, I don't think we should lump it all on kids. We do have to not give up on adults and, heaven forbid, talk to someone at work, if we're lucky enough to have work.
Yeah. Alrighty, thank you for that. Now, I think our next question was over here.
Hi, my name's David. I work mainly in international development. And one of the differences between working overseas and here, I've noticed, is that overseas, no matter how poor the people we're working with, we acknowledge their sovereignty, because after all, it's their country. And I'm just wondering whether, with the experience of the immigrants and of the Aboriginal people, there isn't a bigger mechanism at work, a kind of mental frame, which says as soon as you ask for help from the community, you are deprived of all agency, you become the object of service delivery, and the service deliverers will determine your fate, your circumstances, and your future. And from Paparangi, I'm just wondering too whether in New Zealand the Maori don't experience this now as strongly, because my understanding is that through a kind of renaissance, they've asserted their culture, their ownership, and their economic independence. Thank you.
Paparangi? Oh.
I think the big dirty secret is our owning our colonial past, whether we be in New Zealand or in Australia, and we can't face our colonial present and what we're doing to people who want to join our nations. We have to, and we're being extreme colonists in the way in which we do that currently. And to understand and deconstruct that, we have to own our colonial past. And as you say, honour Indigenous sovereignty. And that's a biggie. Because it's built on such a big lie.
What does that honour Indigenous sovereignty, what does that mean for new arrivals to Australia?
What I found really interesting is the one community that without fail has welcomed people seeking asylum into the country has been Indigenous Australians, has been Aboriginal people. The one people who, as custodians of land, could sit there and demand otherwise. And I find it quite ironic. And I think a big part of this conversation is tackling racism. When we are still unwilling to face what we've done to Aboriginal Australians and the genocide that we've committed and the ongoing persecution that we commit, how the hell do we have any chance of dealing with refugees? We still can't deal with our first people, let alone our most recent. And I think there are very unique and different issues. I wouldn't dare say there's similar issues, but there is something at the heart about our unwillingness to come to terms with what we've done to Aboriginal people in this country. And then within that, the way in which we treat refugees, I think, is an extension of that in terms of our failure to accept that racism remains a major problem in this country. Pretty much you look at our first Indigenous Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, his first policy that he's likely put through is a $42 million cut to Indigenous services. You look at incarceration rates for Indigenous women at all records high, youth over-representation in our prison system, record high, the child protection system is simply an extension of the stolen generation. Where the hell are we going that you would sit there and go, we're making progress on these areas, and under an Abbott government, we're going to keep going backwards, is my thoughts on it. So we've got to start talking about race in this country.
All right, start talking about racism. Would anyone like to pick that up? So we've got a hand up just here, just behind you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Targol. I'm an architect and I also work in humanitarian field at the moment. My question is from Con. I'm new to Australia, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I have this idea that maybe the first step is to change the image that people have about migrants and asylum seekers, because to my surprise, even the people that I work with, which are very nice people, they have big hearts, but they have this understanding that all these people are poor, they are coming from countries which have no technology at all, so even working with a computer is a big challenge or big issue in their life, which is not correct. So I think maybe it's media, I'm not sure what it is, but that keeps giving this image of asylum seekers and migrants as poor people without any education or understanding of new technologies. So maybe a first step to accept these people in the country is to understand where they are coming from, and that maybe they are not really different from people living in Australia. It's just a political situation or other situation which forced them to leave their country, not exactly the lack of education or knowledge.
Look, I think one of the big problems is why people think human rights are theirs and that they have the right to give and take them. And within that is also an arrogance that only they are the educated and the skilled and the capable and the resilient. Forget the fact that 70% of the people I work with have skills in demand in this country. We are working very much, sadly, this is an indictment on our country. Sadly, the moral and humanitarian argument isn't enough. The fact that we're breaching the laws and then what we're doing is immoral. We have to make the business argument. And sadly, we're going very much into that space of actually showing the importance of refugees to our economy. But I wish we didn't have to get there. I think that's actually a sad day, but very much what we're doing. But what breaks my heart at the heart of it, this morning I was in Dandenong at a new centre. We've just started a new centre there. And there are these men living on no money who aren't allowed to work, and they filled the room desperate to learn English, desperate to participate, desperate to be part of this country. And these are the people we're telling, you're not welcome, you don't belong here. And when I see the extraordinary waste and I see the extraordinary suffering that continues to happen in refugee communities, that's the thing that appalls me and enrages me the most. How dare our government and our communities sit there idly by and let this happen? And it's time, you know how we change a built environment? We rip it down, we tear it down, and we build something that's a hell of a lot better. That's what we need to do as a community. We can't sit there passively and just accept it.
There's a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Tear it
Con.
down. Rip it down.
Where are we up to now? Just up the back behind you.
This is all fair enough, but Australia's a mess without all these problems as well. You know, we've got a car industry, and I don't care about the car industry, but it's about to fold. A lot of the farmers are having a lot of trouble because of Coles and Woolworths. Everybody knows what I'm saying. A lot of people know what I'm saying. So, you know, like these are all relevant problems, but the country has so many problems.
These issues are not optional. These human rights are not optional. And people that have no social, economic or political power aren't the ones screwing over other people with no social, economic and political power. It is government, it is multinationals, it's the bloody corporate world. And there needs to be the amount of times I get, how can we help refugees? What
There's
about
a
our
whole lot
homeless?
of people who are about to lose their jobs
And I feel
in the
for
auto
them.
industry.
Yeah, but we're not in competition. We're not in competition.
This is
we're
not an
community,
either
not an
or.
economy.
I'm just saying that the landscape is a tricky landscape.
Yeah. And no one deserves to lose their job,
So can
but
we have
it's
a go
not one
at
or the
framing
other.
a question? Is it around, given that lots of things are in trouble and there are problems all over the place, how do we see the sorts of issues that we've been talking about? So Con has, I think, made a claim about some things are non-negotiable. You might be suggesting some other things are non-negotiable as well. But was your question around how do we see these issues in relation to a broader set of issues?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I don't know.
Fair enough. Reasonable comment. Marcia or Paparangi?
Okay, I'll say something to you. You know, I shop at Suffolk, right, in Brunswick, and I have the same problems that you have, okay? What I'm saying is that there are people in Australia who don't have our problems. We might go to Suffolk or Woolworths or wherever we go, but, you know, at least there's a supermarket. There are many communities that don't have a store, that have no access to what we have access to. We might not like the duopoly, but we have access to services that other people don't have in Australia. Now, all I'm saying is, and none of my proposition hurts you in any way at all, is that Aboriginal communities should be regarded as a market where Bunnings, Mitre 10 and other chains can sell products that Aboriginal people need. I am simply saying they have no access to them and they want them, and they could improve their lives if they did have access. None of what I'm saying hurts you in any way at all. Yes, life is very, very hard for white Australians. It's just shocking. But it gets worse once you get on the other side of the Great Dividing Range.
Okay, now we've got one down the front. Microphone coming. If anyone else has got a question that I want, you're next. Okay, thanks. Yep.
Good afternoon, my name's Melina. Thank you guys very much for sharing your ideas with us this afternoon. They've all been really inspiring, and I think they're all really valid and much needed solutions. I've been kind of sitting here tussling with the question of, well, how? I think probably I'm not the only one who's feeling, you know, perhaps an overwhelming sense of futility in the face of the recent election, like, you know, it's all over now, it's up to us more than ever, all of those sorts of things. And I feel as though perhaps it's time that we perhaps change the conversation from being around Australia as a nation state and, you know, like what are the nation's issues and all of those sorts of things to a bigger conversation or a bigger system, you know, more about us being part of a broader humanity, us being global citizens, you know, as individuals, but also as Australians. And I guess, so my question, getting to it, for you guys is, as an individual, is there any programs or organisations that are engaging that power of the crowd or whatever you want to call it to bring about some of those solutions that you've suggested?
Panel?
At home we have a tribal organisation that tries to link in with different interventions at the time. And I think it goes back to, I can't remember the exact wording, but you know, where you actually have to think internationally, voice nationally and act locally. And so I think that we have to operate on all those different planes. We have to think globally, and we do have to express our voice on what's happening in our nation in terms of different people's rights and different policies. But we do have to act locally in our communities that we live in, on the land that we engage with.
So were you asking, how can I act locally? I accept your ideas, how can I act? Was that your question?
Yeah, I think it's just calling...
Name of the organisation you were talking about? Will that help?
No, it's my tribal organisation.
Right. You want to know, where can I go? Yeah? Any
I'm in
thoughts?
the wrong country.
Well,
Go to New Zealand.
Well, you're not helpless. Like, there's no futility. Like, we are actually deeply powerful human beings. I have no struggle. My freedom is not at risk here. I have the capital, the power and the opportunity, like every single person in this room, to change this world. My organisation, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, I started 12 years ago as a class project at TAFE, and it boomed to now the largest in the country. And what makes it work? 900 people who come, everyday Australians, volunteering their time. Helps over 1,000 people a year, does it without a single dollar from the federal government. How? Simply because in the hearts of every single one of us is passion, inspiration, entrepreneurship and possibility. All you need to do is go out there and volunteer your time, your passion, your energy, your money if you can afford it, and get involved. It's not more complicated than that. If you look at the world and go, this leaves me feeling despair, go and build something better. Do something about it. And it's as simple as rocking up to any one of the hundreds of NGOs across this country or building your own and going, I am here to help. What do you need from me? It's not more complicated than that. At a time like now is the greatest opportunity, because at a time like now, the stakes are never higher when it comes to human rights, and the opportunities to mobilise and the opportunities to come together, cross movements, out of silos, on the broader issues of race, of class, of gender, of identity, and coming together and go, we share a common ground, which is one of being marginalised in this country, and we are powerful in our numbers. And we might be a minority, but we're a minority of millions. Remember that. We're a minority of millions, not few. So it's about getting out there and doing something. Donate somewhere, advocate somewhere, participate somewhere, but bloody do something. Coming to just this is a waste of bloody time.
Marcia, would you like to comment?
I'm not asking anybody to do anything except, you know, expand their imagination a bit, right? So I just thought that, you know, the Twitter feed on what I was saying was very interesting, because half the Twitter kids completely misunderstood what I was saying, you know, and so they tweeted that I was saying, we're such victims of Aboriginal culture that, you know, we can't let white people build our houses, we have to do it ourselves. I'm not saying that at all. But you see, that's the dominant view down here in, you know, southeast urban Australia. That's what people think of us, that, you know, we're weaklings, we're incompetent, and, you know, if we just stay within our culture, everything will be all right, but if we join modernity, you know, we might explode or something, I don't know. I'm just asking for a leap of imagination. I'm just asking for Australians to grow up and stop feeling guilty and, you know, pigeonholing us as primitives. That's all I'm asking. And just, you know, see, people don't even get what I'm talking about. Home's Beautiful project, Aborigines, huh? What? Look, the sweetest young kid just asked me before, you know, look, I feel really embarrassed about the Lockhart River dances last night. You know, I felt like it was really voyeuristic and Aboriginal culture shouldn't be on show like that. And yet, you know, you have completely stark naked ballets here in Melbourne. What's the problem? Why are we embarrassed? Why are you so embarrassed and uncomfortable about Aboriginal culture? Ask yourself the question. Think of us as human beings. Can't you do that?
So 2 things to do. One is not be embarrassed. Another, I think, that Con was saying is just do something. Don't have to find the best thing to do.
Just start somewhere.
Just somewhere.
Start somewhere.
Which might be
Anywhere.
starting up your own thing.
It could be.
Or going to New Zealand. Any of those are possible.
You're not a problem.
Alrighty, how are we going on time? We've got a little bit longer. Where are we? Oh, now I promised someone. Yes, I have made a promise up here. Yes.
Hi, thanks very much for your contributions. The question I'm left with ties to the notion of a sense of place, and clearly what was spoken about by Paparangi was that a sense of place is deeply tied to identity, is memory, is culture, is history. And in the absence of that, when you've had to abandon that link, and you come to Australia, and I come from a background where, you know, sense of place is completely disrupted over many generations of movement. And so I'm left wondering, what would it look like if, as communities, and Con, this very much ties into, for the first step is to be welcoming, but let's say we get to that point, what's the possibility of co-creating a new sense of place that can be shared, that can be tied to identity, that goes beyond bricks and mortar, and is about the engagement with the wider community, what it looks like to be in a city, or to have some tie to a place, and whether it's suddenly feeling an affiliation to the local beach, or whether it's co-creating community spaces in the lived environment. And I'm just wondering what that would require, whether it would be possible, and if it would go any distance to trying to rectify that sense of loss that people who've had to flee their homes might feel, in terms of reclaiming or constructing a new sense of identity in a new land.
Con? Or Paparangi?
When we move, I don't believe that we become amnesic. And that's Con's point. That's my take on one of Con's point. And that we have to make sure the memories that are being created in the move and the disruption are not dreadful memories. So first of all, while you might barrack for Australia sometimes, you probably still barrack for your old nation too. You probably have that mix of identity. All I'm saying is that in coming to a new place, I moved from Wellington to Auckland, and I started to enjoy being back in Auckland. Although, you know, I still know there's nothing like Wellington on a good day. There's not that many of them. And so I had to give up being a Wellingtonian and become back to an Auckland city dweller girl. And so your sense of identity changes. You move your football team. You start barracking for a different netball team. So you change your level of loyalties, and so already your identity is changing. Already you're growing a new identity, and I'm trying to make a point that you embed it in a community in a deeper and deeper way that includes the natural environment. And so you become advocates for the natural environment. You become advocates for that place that you are living in. And becoming an advocate for it, working for it, protecting it, engaging with it, loving it, and being loved by it will help be part of your growing identity with that place. At the same time, if you're non-Indigenous, it's recognising that there's another layer, and that that growing your identity has to incorporate that other layer, that Indigenous layer with it. Does that make sense?
You're nodding there.
Yeah, look, I think at the heart, my mum was telling me a story a couple of weeks ago. She was at the supermarket and she was talking Greek to her sister, and a woman turned around and said, "This is Australia, speak English." And my mother turned and said, "Shut up, you rude racist person." But at the heart of that, my mother's been here 40 years now, and she says, "I still don't feel like I belong anywhere. I don't feel like I can go back home. It's been too long, and I've never really truly felt welcomed here." And at the heart of that has always been this pressure to assimilate, and this pressure to be Australian. Look around you, and go, well, who's Australian here? And this idea of Australian values. But we have a society that's happy to appropriate Indigenous culture when it suits it to sell a four-wheel drive, and to appropriate my culture and so many other cultures because they love their food or how exotic you are. But when we sit there saying, no, we want to stand as equals and have our cultural integrity protected and maintained, and we want to be part of a society while keeping who we are because it enriches us and enriches this country, that's what's at stake. And I see that even with my Muslim friends, where I'm sitting there having to prove that they're moderate. Who goes around to Anglo-Australians and goes, "Prove to me that you're not a racist"? No one has that conversation. So that ongoing pressure to fit in and to belong is at the heart of that. About if you're constantly being told that your culture is a problem and that your identity is a problem or a risk or a threat, how the hell can you have good mental health? Some amazing research that came out the other week that talked about how racism is at the heart of causing so many of the depression and anxiety issues that young people face. It makes people sick. And we need to start dealing with that.
Folks, we're coming towards the end. We'll take maybe one more question, and while that's happening, we've got a hand here while the microphone's on it. Oh, you've already got it. Can I ask people to turn your mobile phones on in preparation to voting, but make sure they don't ring in the next 2 minutes? Your question.
Thank you very much. I think that we could remain superficial about this and say, well, let's do things at a local community, but all the things that you've been talking about are hugely expensive for Australia, either negatively, because they impact upon your mental health, as you were just saying, the waste of money that we're not employing a group of people that are coming to our shores, the waste of money, Marcia, in terms of providing not just adequate housing and allowing Aboriginal people to have a home beautiful or whatever to improve their health and well-being. So that the issue that we haven't discussed, which was what Lynn, I think, was getting to, is, well, who should we be getting at here? Who are the people who are not getting these messages, who are not getting the evidence that associates how we live, where we live, and how we can control our own lives, is a hugely important risk factor, not just for mental health gone, but the health and well-being of our communities and therefore our people. So how do we get these messages through to both state and federal governments that these are probably very important issues for our health and the health of our kids? Seems to me we might...
Great challenge to end on. Can I ask each of the panel to comment on that? How do we get our message through to who needs to hear it? Who would like to go first?
Well, I'll say something. Look, I don't think it's so important to convince government, really. Well, yeah, they do have, some money, but they don't always spend it in the right places. That's true, and it's an ongoing problem. But really, I think the problem is that, you get a little cultural mindset about a problem, and people are not really very creative in overcoming these problems in Australia. So, why is Aboriginal Affairs such a basket case? Why is Indigenous Affairs just, across the country a basket case? It's because of lack of imagination. It's because of stupidity. It's because people believe nonsense. No amount of money can save you from that. So there's the problem right there. I don't think it's about money, it's about being smart. And as for the problem of racism, this demand that everybody assimilate, I ask you all this question. Do you really want to be like Pauline Hanson? No, you don't. Whether you're white or black or Greek, you don't, right? So just don't worry about it. When they say, stop speaking your language, speak English, or, all the other variations you get on that kind of rudeness, just ignore it. You know, I mean, really. The people who make these demands are saying this to us because their lives are miserable. You know, and they're petty. Like,
Thanks, Marcia.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
call on that one, Con and then Paparangi.
Very quickly, look, cruelty is expensive, so it's not about money. There's billions to spend on locking people up or dispossessing Aboriginal people. What we need to do is actually forsake government and actually build from community and all the pillars of influence, from business to sport to multi-faith to multi-ethnic to youth to community. We need to build it. We need to build our own new ecosystem of change, and we need to do it together, because the only way government is going to shift, because on both ends, what we've got is not a crisis of boats or a crisis of Aboriginal communities. We've got a crisis of leadership in this country. And until we can offer a better alternative and demand it, we're going to keep getting the same half-assed, mediocre leaders like the Abbotts and the Rudds of this world. So it's up to us.
Thank you, Con. Paparangi.
I'd like to pick on the fact that there is a huge cost of doing nothing. And it's the negative spend is the spend that we should be really highlighting and focusing our researchers on. And a health economist working out the cost of inequalities, the cost of breaches of rights. There's a nice little project for a good research team. But apart from that, I do believe it's just come to the stage of just do it and just start locally with your family, with yourself, in your neighbourhoods, and do it.
Okay, thank you. Now, folks, we've reached that time, yes, I think it's where we're going to vote. So can we have the screen up on, the poll up on the screen, please? So this is the time for you here in the audience and people online to vote for. Now, I have an ethical problem. Are we only allowed to vote for one of the three propositions? Is that fair? All right.
You can vote for all three at the same time.
Break the system. So we've got a kind of, there's subversive movement going on here saying you can vote for all three. Mike, you can't. Your phone will break if you try to vote for all three. So you've got to pick one, and you could organise with the others to pick the other two.
What happens with the votes is that the outcomes of each of the sessions of the festival are recorded. We take everything that all of our speakers have discussed with our audiences, but we also take the outcomes of the voting polls that they're putting up at the end of each session as an outcome of public consultation and public deliberation. So it's not just about the experts getting up here and telling you what they think, it's also about you telling us which you think is the highest priority. What do you think we can do? What has the most priority for you? And that goes into our festival report at the end, and that becomes a document that we can track outcomes against. So the next time a Festival of Ideas comes around, we can look back at this and says, this is what we decided at this festival, how did we go? Where are we up to? Who did something? And we can bring those people back in to talk to us about it, and we can get a real sense of whether we're making progress.
Mike, is that counting down?
It is, we've got 9 seconds.
There's 9 seconds left, be quick.
So those numbers, the votes so far, are they against each one?
I beg your pardon?
They're the votes so far against.
Yes, they are. And we just closed, I think.
Oh, that was quick. Fortunately, the electronic world is not the only world in which we can communicate. So it's now my job to draw it all together. That's impossible. Redraw. Has it closed? It's closed. Sorry, folks, if you didn't get in. But remember, that's not the only way of expressing what you care about or think about. And in particular, I guess one thing that we can do is stop thinking about that as a competition and somebody won. But in fact, what we've got is the ideas to take away. So can I ask you to join with me in thanking our speakers for the ideas that they've given us today?